edition of the Witsup podcast. It is fantastic to see all of your friendly faces. Today, we are welcoming to the Witsup podcast someone who I actually recorded back in 2017, it must have been, and that recording is lost. It's out there in the ether somewhere. Is that the right word? That'll do. It's out there somewhere. It never got published. I lost it. I can't remember. It may have been on the trip where I was flying back from Europe and I left one of my external hard drives on the plane, never to be found again. Was that from Europe? That could have been Kona. Oh, gosh. Always you got to like back up and then back up stuff. It's my worst nightmare. Now I back up all the things across all different platforms. Anyway, I caught up with Beth Ellis, who is now a retired professional triathlete. Back in the day, one of the most animalistic racers out on course. I often, and we speak about this during the podcast, but I often use her as a reference when I'm talking about things like white line fever and the difference between the person and the athlete. I think she's a great example of that. So anyway, I actually ended up, she is American and I've seen her all across the globe. But it just so happened that I recorded a podcast with her when I was in London, and I was actually meant to be having downtime with some friends, but she was in London and so was Jodie Cunnama. Did I record a podcast with Jodie? No, I didn't record one with her. Actually, I need to get in contact with her. She's in quarantine at the moment with 3 small humans and her husband, James. So I'm not going to contact her for a podcast right now because that would not be conducive to a quiet space to record a podcast. Anyway, that has reminded me that she's another one who I need to catch up with for the podcast. Back to Beth Ellis. I did record a podcast with her when she was in London. We both happened to be there. Her husband, I think, was there for work, so she went along for the journey. Anyway, I don't have that recording. So finally, we have caught up. And it was great because I've not spoken to her in quite some time, always via text messages and social media, using social media the way it should be used in terms of keeping up with people, finding out what's going on, that kind of thing. That's how I like social media to be used the most. Anyway, caught up with her. Fantastic catching up with Beth. She is now a mother of 2 and is still coaching a few triathletes. So she's got some interesting insights on all of the things. We're going to get to her episode in just a few moments. This will be released just days before Ironman Cairns, the Asia Pacific Championship. So good luck to everyone who is racing on Sunday. I hope it all goes well and we wish we're up there. However, due to the Melbourne lockdown, we as in I won't be in Cairns, which is a shame, but it is what it is. Last time we were there was 2019, and I guess the next time will be 2022. Anyways, over to it. Let's get going with my chat with Beth Ellis.
Do you see this photo right here? Do you remember? You probably don't remember this photo, huh?
I can't see it.
Let me pick it up. It's gonna fall. A really good photographer took this photo.
I remember that.
Yeah. No. It's a great. It was poor Kiki the last time, and she's like, before you guys brought these other puppies into the house, they ruined my life.
How does she get along with them?
She tolerates them and enjoys the food they provide her, but she's not doesn't really like she loves them, but she's not really a kid dog. She's just being a rescue. So
sure.
She's not real lovey-dovey, but she definitely loves them, and she'll play with them a bit and lick them and tolerates almost anything. But she's not one of those dogs that I love. I don't know, on Instagram there's like the golden doodles that you see just cuddled up with the babies. She's not like that, but She's pretty nice.
Yeah. Henry's probably pretty similar. Like he'll very early on, he'll want to be near her and stuff, but now she's just at that age where she pulls his fur and everything, and he's the same. He tolerates it, but he'll be like, all right, I'm just going to leave.
Yeah. That's how, well, and any other kid, Kiki would just like, snap at him. But her kid, she kind of is like, all right, I'm getting out of here.
We, if Henry snaps at Frankie, we're trying hard, like not to tell him off, because he doesn't bite her, but that's his language, right? That's his
exactly,
way of saying that's enough.
Yeah, so you kind of get the F off me. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's really so hard. True, because that's how Kiki is too. Like her little language is a snap is like back off. Like, Yeah.
But your instant reaction is like, oh, don't, but I don't know. It's kind of like you need to let them figure out their boundaries within reason.
And I don't know how Frankie is, but my kids, like, they don't really care. Like if Kiki snaps at them, they don't get, it's not like a kid that, overreacts. They're sort of like, okay, she doesn't want to hang out with me right now. So they're just, move on to something else.
See, Frankie's more like, oh, this is funny. This is a game.
Poor Henry.
I know. Okay, so I'm obviously already recording. I just figured I wanted to hit record because we've got so much to catch up on that we need to record this, because I'm sure there's going to be gold in whatever we end up talking about. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't know about gold, but
you better bring the gold.
Oh, no. I feel like I'm more of a silver type person.
Just a runner-up, a bridesmaid kind of person.
Yeah.
What happened to that spot? What happened to the honey badger?
No. Well, that's the thing is I feel like I used to race, like if I was going to race good, I had to be angry. And I just feel like even the last like year and a half, maybe it was tough for me to find the anger. And so I don't know. I was definitely time to move on, because I'm not a good happy racer, which it's kind of sucks, because I do think happy racers are happier in general, but I was just sort of a mad, angry person when I raced. And that was sort of how I was able to tap into trying to, get that fire to win.
Yeah.
It was definitely an angry fire. And there's none left, especially now being like having kids. I feel like I'm even more of like, too happy.
Damn it. Too happy.
Yeah. Yeah. You take the win.
Yeah.
I'll be back here.
So this is interesting, because so many people that I speak to on this podcast, and I don't know if you listen to this podcast, you probably don't, because you're probably pretty busy doing your own thing.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I try to listen to it when I'm doing a little bit of exercise I can get in. I listen to podcasts, because I do everything just easy. So it's like easy runs, easy, like the nice coffee rides. Like, so I listen to mostly podcasts. Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
So yeah, I try to keep up with it. Yeah.
All right. Well, there's a test at the end of this podcast to see.
Okay.
But so many people who I happen to speak to, especially older athletes, more matured athletes, tend to sort of say they've recognized later in their career that the happier they are, the better they perform. But you, and this doesn't surprise me because I know you are the complete opposite.
I think so. I don't think I was there's a reason that I did best under like Brett's system, where it was like not really like a fun environment most of the time. I mean, definitely the girls I trained with were amazing. Like I couldn't have asked for better training partners, but it wasn't like a fun, it was sort of like living by myself in the mountains, like holed up like a hermit pretty much. So, and like, coming out of that is when I had some of the better results. So and then whenever I'd be at home training with Eric, this obviously before kids, I just would be like, I guess I'll train today a bit, and just feel like I would get complacent, I think, at home.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. Did you recognize that while you were in it, or more now that you can look back at it now that you're retired?
I think more in hindsight. I think everything's always clear in hindsight. You just don't really yeah, you can't see as clearly when you're in the middle of the fray.
So say training's going really well, you're pretty happy, everything's ticking along nicely, and you come to race day and you're like, shit, I'm not angry. I need to find some anger.
Yeah.
What did you, and I love this because typically we sort of ask the questions like, how do you get out of that dark zone? Like what are your mantras? What were your anti-mantras? What was your go-to to get you fired up? If everything was going well, what did you draw upon?
I think usually you have to self-sabotage somewhere, so I'm sure there'd be somewhere, like whether it was like some dramatic thing with the bike, or I remember, there's always something. I'm trying to think of, there's definitely been races too. Like one race I brought goggles that were just like, had like lenses in them for like corrective vision. So like I couldn't, but just things that make you have to overcome something. I think I'd find something like that, or the chip on I always think I raced better when it was like the underdog. And then once you start winning and you become like the person people are gunning for, I think it's harder in some ways. Or you're off the front of the race. I always think that's harder than the chasing. Much rather be chasing than off the front, like, oh shit, where are they?
Which I imagine is quite hard for you, I guess, apart from when you're at championship races. Although I guess you did race a lot of big races. You always seem to toe the line at championship races, because I felt like that brought out the best in you, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it did quite a mix, like where some was a big championship and then some that it was, you against. I definitely had races where I was off the front by like 20 minutes or something on the bike, and like way over biking. Like that was the other thing in my career, is like I was not a good biker, but I would just like bike way too hard and then like just melt down on the run. And it was like, I don't know. I think in hindsight, I would have done some stuff differently, but I think sometimes I get carried away on the bike and just
angry.
Leave it out there. Yes, angry. Yeah, look at the other girls. Like, in my mind, they would all be drafting, and that would add some anger, But I'm sure they weren't. But you know what I mean? Like, you can. Plus, you only see people for a split second, so you have no idea what's actually going on behind you.
Yeah.
But you have to add the drama in your head to get so fired up.
You're hilarious. I always use you as a reference about white line fever, that you're like this, super sweet, lovely person, albeit a smart ass, but a sweet person off the race course. But once you cross that start line, you are, you're a honey badger. The honey badger don't give a shit. You just...
Yeah, I definitely was an asshole on the race course. Yeah. Yeah. No, like an unapologetic one too, but it's definitely was, kill or be killed out there to a certain extent. And we're racing I was not one to be out there smiling. And I never, the more power to people who are out there, getting out of the swim, waving and smiling. But for me, it's like, the whole thing was, this is war. Like, what are you doing smiling? Like, or people on the marathon smiling. It's like, this is a death march. Who are you people? But I'm out here suffering. Yeah, usually cursing at Eric.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Marathon, yeah. Yeah.
So do you remember a time where you let rip at someone else out on the race course? I'm sure it happened to every race, but...
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. But maybe not all the time, though, at a volume they could hear. So, I'm sure it's like... So I'm not sure how many times I would have yelled loud. Because, you don't want to yell too loud, but...
Yeah.
Race course.
Did you ever feel like you had to apologize to anyone post-race?
I'm sure I should have. Now it's probably too late. They probably all hate me, but sorry.
Sorry.
Not to anyone.
Just a blanket sorry.
Yeah. I just think you get myopic on the race course, and you get so intense on what you're doing, and definitely the manners are out the window at that point.
But this is one of the reasons I love you, is that you this is so truthful. Like, it's so honest, because I don't, and like you said, each to their own. However you want to race is how you race. But I've never understood the matey, pally out on race course, because you are out there racing to win. And I actually had a discussion with Alicia Kay about this, and Hella Fredrickson pulled her up on it, saying, you got to stop being so friendly, because we're out there to destroy each other. And it changed her mindset, and it changed the way that she raced to, in a positive performance kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. I mean, those two are both fierce competitors that, especially any Olympic distance race, I would be lining up next to them and just be like, all right, see you guys in the finish. It's at some point they'd be going past me or starting or out of the swim before me, but yeah.
So towards the end of your career, that was a big sign for you that it was time to start wrapping things up, because you felt you lost that animal instinct?
I think so. And I think Eric actually kind of saw it even before I did. I think he was almost the one who was saying maybe it's time before. I mean, I knew it was time. Partially we wanted to have kids, and I think I would have regretted if I'd waited much longer to start a family. But yeah, that was definitely, the fire was starting to go out. I definitely had Ironmans the last year and a half that I was winning the race and just was like, wanted to stop. Can I just go off in the bushes here? Like, I'm just not like, I don't know. The fire wasn't, I was sort of wondering what I was doing out there a little bit, because there wasn't the same fire that I'd had early in my career. And I wonder, part of it is Ironman is just such a hard sport too, that, I mean, I know some people can sustain careers over, 20 years, but for me, it was partially I started the sport so late that I knew I only had limited time, but definitely the years where Brett had me do 4 Ironmans a year, I think that just burned me out too. 4 Ironmans is way too many in one year. I don't think,
especially the way you race as well. Like, you're not doing a crazy Ironman.
No, and the way Brett would have you train too. It's just, I mean, I love Brett, but he definitely had me do some stupid stuff that in hindsight, I like 4-hour runs, like, the month before Kona, like, but like in hindsight, I love, he did a great job with all of his athletes, but I think in hindsight, there's some stuff that maybe we would have done a little differently. But like 2-hour run, I think before Ironman Switzerland, I did a 2-hour run and a long ride, like in the 4 days before. Just like, why? Yeah, why are we doing this? But but I mean, I do think that kind of training and that kind of racing just kind of mentally and physically fries you a bit. And I was older at that point. I mean, I was 39 when I retired. I think it's kind of at the point where the body, I mean, I think the mind can overcome, but the body's definitely moving on the downward trajectory around that point. I mean, and to the athletes like those, I know Meredith Kessler was still racing, and I saw her post where somebody was like, she should have retired, and that pisses me off, because people should be able to retire on their own time. If like her and another one like Dee Dee, like, how awesome is it? They're still out there fucking racing. Like, I couldn't do it, but I'm so impressed. Like, I watched Tulsa and I was like, thank fucking God I'm not out there racing an Ironman. Like, that looks so hard.
Yeah, I really like that post from Meredith. I'm actually going to pull it up because there's something in it that, and obviously, sorry, that bit where she overheard people talking about her. Yeah. But her response, this was my favorite bit. I'm actually just going to pull it up, was, and like you say, people can retire whenever they want for whatever reason.
Exactly.
No one else's business.
Oh,
here we go. At 43, now that was her 70th iron distance race. It's just insane.
That is, I can't even imagine.
I'm just trying to remember, and this is off the top of my head now, Hilary Biscay, how many did she end up doing in the end? Because she was...
I don't know, but quite a few at a high level. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I imagine close to 50. No, Belinda was really high too, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Was Belinda almost 50 or?
I think she was 50. But I think Hilary, and we've probably got people, yelling in our ears.
Yeah.
But I think Hilary had the most, but I've got a feeling now that Meredith has topped that. But I don't know for sure, and I'll look that up before we publish this. But
either way, incredible.
Exactly.
Like all of the ladies doing 50, 70, however.
She wrote, at 43, it fulfills me deeply to still be racing at all while you, and she's talking about Mac, are my number one priority. My role now is more matriarchal in every way. A role I cherish, blah, blah, blah. I loved that sentence. My role now is more matriarchal in every way. And I don't know, there was just something really powerful about that really struck a chord with me. That, I'm not here to impress old mate on the sidelines. I'm here to do what I love, to be a role model for my kid, to continue, giving life lessons in the way that I know how, type of thing. That's how I took that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and probably for Mac, but also some of the women on the race course too are, just starting out in their career and kind of seeing somebody, not, who knows, she could go another 20 years, but seeing somebody who's kind of been through it is also nice for giving them a role model to emulate. And
for sure.
But definitely, I mean, it kind of brings back to me though, that that's one of the things I couldn't race after having kids, because I just would be too happy. I'd be like, oh, there's my kids. I'm going to stop. Okay. Could you pause the clock so I could just give them a little hug? Like, no, I for me personally, I couldn't have, it was time, especially having kids. And I also just think injury wise, if I tried to come back after having kids, I think I would have had so much. I mean, it's just, I think your body is different. And then obviously if you're breastfeeding, like the stress fracture risk, I think there's just so many variables that, make it really hard. Like, I think the women that come back after having kids, it's so impressive, because there's a lot of things for them besides not only having a small human to take care of. They also have a body that, is dealing with breastfeeding and, loose joint, everything that changes.
Yeah, definitely.
Those kids. Yeah.
I think that's one thing I really underestimated after having Frankie was the breastfeeding. So, how much that takes from you, because, in my head I was like, but I'm eating and I'm doing this and doing that. And someone just basically said, but you're not getting a solid night's sleep. And that's like, your body can cope with it. Like a woman's body is made to be able to cope with that for a certain period of time, but the kid is taking everything from you from breastfeeding. So there's a reason why it's really hard to go for a run and you might end up injured. Like that, there's a very good reason. I really underestimated that side of things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's like the risk of stress fracture too. I mean, I had a bunch of stress fractures early in my running career, and it's just, I think it would have been tough to balance the two, just because you really need a perfect diet to kind of get enough for those nutrients and not deplete your calcium. And yeah,
absolutely. I would love to know, who was your favorite person to race against?
Geez, that's tough. I mean, I feel like I had so many good battles with different athletes over the years. And on different situations, like one that I raced, I felt like quite often is Leanda Cave, and she might not think of, but there's a couple where I just, the year she won Kona, we all had kind of been on the bike at the same, and we all ended up getting penalties for different reasons. And I actually saw her penalty, which was, she got I mean, I didn't see Carolyn's because I just wasn't in a spot to see it, but Leanda's I saw, and it was stupid. She pulled out to pass Carolyn and then pulled back in because, you know, she didn't get past. And then mine was Peter Verbrusik, had a broken back in the race. And so I was kind of going to go up to pass him. And then I didn't know, like, you know, because I'd seen her get busted for trying to pass and not being able to. So I was like, I don't know what and then he got to a hill and basically, like, I guess because of his back, he like almost came to a stop. And like, I just like head down, didn't even see, and got into his draft zone and just, But anyway, regardless of that, but that was one of those battles that, you know, you kind of, I mean, I always respected her, that she had that amazing 2012 season where she just won both titles. I mean, that was incredible. And and then we had a couple of Wildflower. She just, I think 7 seconds at Wildflower in 2011, or was something like one of those years, might even been 2012 too, but who else? But I mean, I always loved like racing Rennie and Caroline, and I mean, all the top competitors in my little era. I mean, and then in the 70.3, you always knew if you were going to line up against MBK or Heather Wortell, you were going to get your ass handed to you if you weren't fit. Usually me early in the season. I never was. I couldn't race well all year. I was one of those athletes that, especially in the spring, I felt like I was always getting pounded. But it was good. It kind of like let you know, okay, I need to go to camp because I'm obviously not getting it done on my own.
Sorry, keep going.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I just love training with. I feel like I got to train with so many amazing athletes, and it was really, that's kind of what I miss is like training and getting to race with the relationships you get with everyone when you're. Because now I'm like on the East Coast, I don't really get to see many people, and especially not COVID. But
was that hard as part of the retirement? I imagine it was quite hard being it's not secluded, but it's away from the people and the life that you knew.
It definitely was harder, I think, in some ways, because you know, making new friends as an retired 40-year-old is a little tougher.
Retired 40-year-old asshole.
Retired 40. You know, I had to change my ways a little otherwise. But yeah, it's definitely, you know, just trying to get out, and I met a bunch of people through swimming, like kind of brought me back a little bit to the pool. Otherwise I would never swim again. But and then we have some family out here, but it's definitely, I would have loved in Colorado. It would have been nice because so many of us were having kids around the same time. Rachel, Rennie, trying to think, I'm sure Mary Miller was another. Yeah, Laura. Yeah. So it's just would have been nice to kind of have that, because it's, I mean, it is nice. You kind of end up hanging out with your kids' friends, which is great. But I think I would have had a sort of a built-in, you know, little play group already, and people to kind of bounce questions off easier than, you know, sending a message and waiting to hear back. So. But I do actually think, on a different note, like having kids, I think retirement for men must be so much harder, because like at least for women that have kids, it's sort of a soft landing pad as you kind of figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. I think like, because there's just no way you could have a real job while raising like 2 little kids. I mean, obviously coaching, I think I'd always love to do, but it's not really a full-time, at least not for me at this point. It's something I'm able to fit in around, but you know, the kids are just it's sort of taking all your energy that you're focused in on racing, and now you have these little humans you have to take care of, and you know, protect them, make sure they don't kill themselves in a moment, or you don't kill them. But yeah, so it's sort of, I don't know, it's kind of a nice sort of landing pad, you know, give me some bounces as I kind of figure out what I'm doing with the rest of my life.
It's an interesting perspective. I'd never really thought about it like that, but yeah, you're probably right.
For the men, it's in some ways it'd be hard, because when do you retire? There's no reason to retire. I mean, if if as a woman, if you do want to have kids and a family, I think you either stop in the middle of your career and then maybe have, if you want more than one kid, you kind of can add some at the, how you figure it out. Like for the women, it's definitely figuring it out, but for the men, it's when am I done? And so they have to actually, figure out, I just think it is a little bit harder in some ways. I mean, they don't have any kind of other reason other than looking inward and seeing when they're done.
Yeah.
And then I think, they're under the gun as far as figuring out what they want to do next, and which I think takes a while for some people. And some people it's quick and they know exactly what they want to do, or they've already been working on it, which I think is smart for athletes kind of moving on too.
Yeah. And if you didn't have kids, what do you think you'd be doing?
I think I would still be coaching. I just don't know if I'd be doing something else too. Because I think the coaching is nice, keeps me, because as we discussed, I have zero desire to be out there racing an Ironman myself, but coaching people and sharing all the mostly mistakes I've made, preventing them from making those, and I mean, especially getting to see age groupers who are doing an Ironman for the first time, and sort of the nervous excitement about going into that training and accomplishing that goal is pretty exciting. And then I like working with the pros too, but I've only had a couple that I've really worked with, and it's a different dynamic for pros. I mean, they're out there and it's their living versus someone trying to accomplish something they've never done before, which is a different type of challenge, I think.
And did you find it hard going from being a professional athlete and that being your living, so everything sort of centers around training, to coaching an age grouper who has to fit training in around essentially a 9-to-5 job?
I think it's just so different. They're stressed, like from the job and family, and like Training Peaks doesn't count that in the TSS score or anything, and that's something that it's definitely going to impact their ability to train and recover, and how much sleep are they getting. There's all the little things that I think pro doesn't have to worry about to a certain extent. I mean, they might have a night they sleep bad and you'll hear about it for like the next week. Whereas like the age grouper is like, I consistently is only able to get in so much sleep because they have to get up early to fit in the training because they have a family and all these other variables that I think make it harder, and the challenge as a coach kind of more interesting to try to fit it in and make sure they don't overcook themselves, and but get in enough, obviously, if you want to finish the Ironman with any sort of with goals in mind, kind of hitting those.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've spoken to a lot of pro athletes, I guess, especially athletes who are still racing and doing a bit of coaching on the side. They've struggled to get out of that mindset of training's number one and then we slot everything else in around it as a professional.
Yeah.
And then changing that mindset to figuring out how it works for an age grouper because of everything that you just spoke about. And it's a learning curve, I guess, from a professional athlete's point of view. If you haven't coached age group athletes before, there's so many other factors that you need to consider.
Yeah, well, and everybody's so individual too. I do think so. Yeah, I mean, to build goes into it, like even like muscle fibers. Like a man carrying a lot of muscle is going to get tired quicker than kind of a smaller female. So kind of factoring that in, and age and menopause. I mean, there's so many different hormonal things that happen there that I don't even know if I have the formula, but it's definitely, there's a lot that the women, as they kind of hit those ages, can change the way. I mean, they might have been able to do some like the X volume of training beforehand, and then as they enter that, kind of what they can do changes a bit, and they might need a little more rest, and the body's just not going to respond exactly the same way. And I mean, for men, the same thing. They're going through that as well, kind of their hormones changing.
Yeah. And do you So do you just ask a lot of questions? Because obviously a lot of this stuff doesn't come up in your typical data when they are filling in Training Peaks. Have we got a visitor?
Yeah, somebody's going to bed. Say hi.
Hi.
Hey, Steph. You can't hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear me.
I can hear you. You can't hear me.
Yeah.
Hi.
He says hi.
Hi.
Say hi.
Hi, legend. Yeah.
Yes, Steph was here the night you were conceived.
We say good night.
Good night, bud.
Good to see you.
This is an excellent segue because I did want to bring up that particular, well, not that particular night, but so Bretty and I decided to go to New York for Christmas. Well, what year was it now?
That was the end of 2017. So it would have been New Year's, turning to 2018. Right. No, 2016 to 2017.
Yeah, okay.
Sid was born in
Yeah. So we went to New York. I've always wanted to be in New York for Christmas, so we did that. And then MB was just like, hey, come and hang out in Boston for a couple of days. So we went and hung out with the crew for 3 nights over New Year's Eve. Had an absolute belter of a time. And also just quickly, MB says that, she's no interest in doing triathlons or anything anymore. However, is still highly competitive when it comes to exercise. And I've witnessed that hungover. Is it snowshoes? Putting on snowshoes, doing a snow walk hike, and she was out of there, gone.
Yeah, I still like to beat people, but
it
doesn't have to be in a race at any time. I'll race it. They don't even know that I'm competing against them. They're just somebody in the swim lane, like 5 over.
That competitive spirit never goes. But anyway, so we hung out with MB and the crew, and I hope you don't mind me bringing this up. So we'll cut it if you don't mind me bringing it up. I mean, you brought it up, the fact that Sid was conceived that night. But there was a lot of discussion about trying to get pregnant that weekend, and your mate was talking about what was the thing that
the machine.
And I'm like, and this is before I even knew that I wanted to have kids, and I'm like, oh my God, what have I walked into?
No, it's not really that. It just is a ovulation tracker. It's not really that's like crazy, but it was helpful, like for me, because my cycles were really long. So if I had just gone based on like guessing in the middle of the cycle, that I ovulated late. So like had I just been guessing, I think it would have taken a lot longer. So I think the machine helped, I guess. So we used it for both, and it definitely was Sid was pretty quick, but with Ellis, we were trying for a long time before we kind of were able to conceive him.
Yeah, right. So
partially, but with breastfeeding too, I didn't get my cycles back, so we stopped breastfeeding, and then it still took like 4 months to get cycles back.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, everybody's so different, I guess, too, with that.
Yeah, because I was told if you're breastfeeding, you don't get your period. And I'm like, oh, sweet.
Yeah.
3, maybe 4 months, my period came back, and I was breastfeeding.
Oh, man.
I was not happy.
Yeah, what the hell?
Oh, my gosh.
For me, I breastfed her for 15 months, and then we stopped, and it still took another like 4 months, because I think I stopped in December, and I didn't get my period till like April.
Wow. And do you think your cycle not being atypical, and I'm using inverted commas type of thing, do you think that was a result of a lot of hard training and what you'd done to your body being an elite?
Yeah, I always worried about getting pregnant, because I would have periods where I'd amenorrhea, like I mean, even as a high schooler, I think part of it is when I get stressed. So if I was stressed and training hard, I would only get maybe 4 cycles a year when I would be in the off season or early season. And then it would tend to go away for the race season, no matter, I had years where I was heavier or lighter, and it didn't really seem to matter weight. It was a little more, I think, for me anyway, stress and training load. And I don't think my body really likes training that hard. I think it's like, what the hell are you doing? We're going to turn off all systems.
Yeah.
We're going to, so I mean, I definitely was a little worried, and so it was sort of a pleasant surprise to find out I was able to kind of, as soon as I would stop racing, it would usually come back. And so it's
good.
Yeah, because that stuff's all just scary too if you want kids. And fertility is such a tough thing. I mean, I've known so many people have struggled with the IVF cycles, and that's tough.
And then sometimes it can absolutely, more often than not, be something that's completely out of your control.
Well, and stress is such a factor too, I think, for that too, which I mean, I definitely feel like with Ellis, part of it was my stress, because like every month that would go by that we were trying and we didn't, like I would get a little more stressed. And then finally I was like, all right, we'll go see a doctor. And like we scheduled the doctor's appointment to talk to a fertility specialist. And it was like, then was like, right, like I found out like maybe less than a week before our doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
So it was sort of like, I think just taking the pressure off too, to a certain extent.
That's the exact same thing happened to my friend. Was ready to, didn't actually start the process, but started the conversations about IVF. And the next step was to start the injections.
The hormones. Yeah.
Yeah. And before she did that, fell pregnant. And I imagine it's probably something very similar. That pressure was taken off her for her putting that pressure on herself to do the job or whatever. Because
stress definitely is such a bad. I mean, it's definitely not good for the body.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And when I say it's out of your control, obviously you can try and change factors that contribute to stress, but sometimes you don't realize. I feel like we live in a world of stress without even realizing until you take a step back. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it is like, you can't blame for somebody for, if you really would love to have kids and you're having it is stressful and it's tough and it's emotional and all that's wrapped up in it, and you can't really separate that either. So exactly.
Far out. So then the next time I saw you would have been June-ish, July.
I think so. Yeah.
That year, when you were in London, and so was Jodie Cunnama, Swallow at the time, and you were both pregnant. And I remember walking along the Thames with you two. We'd all called up for coffee and whatnot. And the only thing I remember you guys talking about was mucus plugs.
Yeah, and it left a mark, huh?
It did.
You learned more than you needed to know, and yet then you decided you wanted your own mucus plug.
Oh, you're so funny. Oh gosh. And we went out for lunch and you guys had a juice or something. I was like, I definitely need an alcoholic drink to get through this conversation. But that's when you and I actually recorded a podcast. So MB wrote on our 100th episode that we pushed out on social media saying it's technically the 101st episode because there is one.
Just giving you shit.
There is one floating out there that I've lost that I've tried to recreate, couldn't do it. So we've started from scratch. So this podcast is a long time in the making.
In your defense, weren't you going to a concert? Like you had traveled from a suburb with all your equipment, like dragging it on the train, and then you were going to
the Ed Sheeran concert.
Yeah, yes. I think you were going to a concert.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, and then you had all your stuff, and like, I mean, you made like the full on effort to, and you had, I mean, it was a lot of equipment.
Yeah.
To record. Yeah.
Turns out doing it remotely
Slept
like
to
this.
the concert. Yeah.
This is a lot easier. I should have actually recorded Ed Sheeran in concert.
I know.
Yeah.
You should have, yeah. Record over me with Ed Sheeran. That would have been worth a lot more. That's gold.
Yeah. Selling some bootleg versions of Ed Sheeran. And then, actually, I could have done a mix of the Honey Badger and Ed Sheeran mega mix.
Duet.
Wick, wick.
Nobody wants me singing.
Can we go back to the first time that we met? Do you remember?
Was it Kona, or was it Kona 2013, or
was it Ironman Melbourne?
I remember Melbourne, but I think we meet in Kona before that. I think so. I think it was, and I'm sure I was an asshole because I was stressed about the race.
No,
the stress level in Kona was always like at like the top is 10 and the stress level in Kona was probably like 12.
I actually don't think you were, because one year I actually stayed with you for a few days.
Yeah, was that 2015?
I can't remember, but it was the year that I was a
It was
nomad.
15, yeah. 15. It was 2015, yeah.
And I think sorry?
Oh, no, yeah, it was definitely, well, I was only remembering based on where I stayed.
Yeah. And I didn't, for whatever reason, probably zero money, had nowhere to stay. So I was bouncing from place to place, no car, just carrying my luggage up and down. In
like 80% humidity, 80 degrees, like just sweat.
Oh, my camera gear. Oh my God. I've done things the hardest way possible. But that's what you got to do when you don't have a budget.
It worked out, right? I mean, you're raking in the millions now. Yeah.
But yeah, I remember I'm in Melbourne trying to do an interview with you down at that cafe sitting on the wall, and I'll try and bring it up, and people just kept walking in front of the camera. Like you've got
do you
remember I don't get it. Is it because people have just got their heads in their phones?
Yeah, I don't know.
Dumbasses. But you've got a tripod. There's two people sitting on a wall talking with a microphone in hand and a massive camera, and then people standing behind the camera, and people would still walk in front of the fucking thing. And you're like,
yeah.
What? Do we need to get some signage and some like gates or something saying this is a closed set? And it just kept happening to you and I.
Yeah, I do. I remember that too. Yeah, and I remember how good the coffee was too. So I was probably rare content because I was well caffeinated.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say it was genius.
It was genius.
Lost
gold. Yeah,
lost again to the ether.
I've got it somewhere. I'm going to see if I can find the bloopers from that. And that's what you miss from being in triathlon, is all that wonderful time spent with me across the globe, right?
Well, I did. Well, you, of course. And then also like the other, I mean, I definitely miss kind of catching up with the athletes in person and training mates that, you just suffering together. There's something about that bond that you can't. I mean, you have other friends, obviously, but friends that you suffer with, I think you have, a unique bond. I definitely remember some Brett sets and series sets with the girls and guys too, that you definitely bonded just getting through it. And I don't know if I know Brett's always or other athletes of Brett's have talked about that trip to the Alpe d'Huez. I felt like that trip always sort of bond, I definitely had, go back again to where I was not really a very good cyclist who like tried to fake my way around it. Like I suffered so bad on that trip. I think there was one year where like Jody Swallow was just so nice to me. She's like, like I was so far back, and she was like, "Come on, guys, let's wait for her dad." And then I remember one year, like just dying like a dog, and like Dina giving me a nice push up the hill. But yeah, you just it definitely was kind of bonding, and the mates that you suffer with. I kind of miss that because and it feels like everybody's spread around the globe right now too, which is hard, but
yeah, definitely.
At least like it's internet and social media, you can kind of keep track of what everyone's doing. And I have to say, I feel like poor Jody Swallow in a hotel room.
Oh my God.
three toddler. I don't think I could do it.
I sent her a message.
Throw myself from the balcony.
Yeah, I sent her a message. I'm like, I'm sending you good vibes, but mostly I'm sending you lots of deep breaths because I like it just.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember just a little bit of time being stuck with like when the pandemic first started we didn't really go anywhere or do anything for like the first month or so with just Sid and I, and in our own house. So we had like anything we needed, and there were long days. You're like, so what are we going to do now? Like, what can I invent for us to do? But yeah.
Oh God! Actually, that was one of the questions I asked when you fill in the thing to do this podcast. Is what's the question? What have you learnt? No.
Oh, change my mind about in the last 5 years.
Yeah,
and that was I think Sid was a year old, and I flew from Boston to the Netherlands, and we were meeting Eric. He was over there in Amsterdam, and previous to having kids, you'd hear the screaming baby on the plane, and I would never have said anything out loud, but obviously, under your breath, you're like, can somebody please, like, what are you even doing? Like, why is your baby screaming?
Yeah.
And then like on a plane with my 1-year-old, who like nothing I could do was like, I had the people yelling, like the angry, disgruntled guy a couple rows back, like telling me to get her to shut up. And I was like, I'm trying everything. Like I'm not pinching her up here. So it definitely changed now if there's a kid screaming on a plane, I just want to go like hug the mom and say it's okay. Like, oh.
That's a really good learning curve, because I would have been exactly the same. And then as a mum or as a parent with a kid on the plane, you're so hyper aware how loud they are. And you feel so guilty. It's horrible. Frankie was always thankfully pretty good on a plane. It was more that now she's a bit older and can walk up and down the aisles.
Yeah,
that's when she started to be trouble, because she would walk up and down the aisle, run, touching every single person as she would. I was chatting to Annabelle Luxford about this yesterday. And I was just like, and some people just don't like kids, and each to their own. But I'm like, oh my God, how do I, like, what's worse, her walking up and down touching everyone, or her screaming at the top of her lungs strapped to a chair? And I'm like,
Yeah, you just gotta hope you get a plane filled with people that enjoy children.
Yeah. And then sometimes you'll get an absolute ripper of a person who will spend time with them for like 30 seconds so you can just breathe.
Yeah, I think one time when Sid was really young, I was on a plane and she had like a blowout, and like the flight attendant was like, "Oh, she's so cute. Can I hold her?" And I was like, "Are you sure? You like there could be poop coming out, but here you go." But
gosh.
Yeah, anybody just being nice to you at that point on a plane with kids, you're just like, "Thank you." This is so.
Yeah, absolutely.
I needed that. Yeah.
Yeah, I flew to from Melbourne to Perth, which is about 4.5 hours, when Frankie was about 5.5 weeks old, because that's where my best friend lives, and she had met Frankie, and then we're about to go to Kona, and I was like, I need you to meet my child. And I'll never forget, and because when they're that little, they're just asleep. She was just asleep the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
But then trying to go to the toilet with this teeny tiny thing, but the hostie, do you call them flight attendants?
Yeah,
obsessed with her, like, just, here, let me hold your baby. But I was like, I've only known Frankie for 5.5 weeks. Should I be handballing her to a complete stranger? And I'm like, well, they can't go anywhere. But it was just a real, like, what's the rule?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then second kid, you're like, here.
Yeah.
Poor second. Like, yeah, second, I do feel bad for the second. We actually like our house isn't, it's, built in 1820, so it's not very big. And so we had a guest room, and poor Ellis is sleeping on a portable crib on the floor. Because we thought Sid would vacate, and we still had the guest bed in there. Poor guy, like, poor second kid. But yeah, but back to that, where it's like, second kid, I wouldn't have even questioned it. I would have been like, here you go. But I know what you mean. With first kid, you would have been like, have you used the hand sanitizer before you hand it over? Like, I remember we had like a mosquito net over Sid with the stroller, so people wouldn't try to touch her when she was young. Like
gosh.
And then with him, it would just be like, here you go.
Sure, here you go. Lick my child. I don't care. Whatever. Remind me, do you have brothers and sisters?
An older brother.
Okay, yeah. So you're the second child.
Yeah.
Had to fend for yourself. Yeah. It's what made you tough,
yeah,
right?
I think second kids, they'll get it. I mean, I think parents the youngest, I think, gets away with a little bit more in some ways, but they also get tortured by the older. Like, I think I didn't get much. The physical torture was more flinching. If I flinched, I'd really get a good punch, or the rat tail. Did you guys ever do the wet rat tail, like with the towel? Yeah. But mostly it was psychological torture. My brother would take my favorite stuffed animals and hang them up with a noose and have a suicide note, like, I can't stand to sleep with you anymore. And like,
what?
Yeah. That was a period where, like, my poor stuffed animals would all be like hanging. Yeah. So yeah, it definitely made me tougher though, right? Yeah.
Jeez, that is next level psychopath. Yeah. And are you two close now?
Yeah. I mean, we don't have as much I think our personalities are a little bit different, but I mean, he has the cutest, like, he lives near my parents, so cutest. My nieces are adorable, and his wife's amazing, and we definitely get along, but we're just definitely a little, I mean, I've always been kind of that, like you said, a little intense, a little competitive. So he's a little more, I think, more laid back. And
yeah. And is it fair to say that Eric's pretty laid back?
I think Eric's really competitive. We actually had to stop playing card games or Scrabble. Oh. We just could go get like competitive and getting like one of us, it would end in one of us throwing the board or like storming away. Like, both of us are way too. So he's competitive. I think both of us are laid back in some ways, but pretty competitive in others. And then he's a little more of an extrovert and I'm a little more introverted, I think. So we kind of complement each other a little there.
Yeah. What makes you say you're introverted?
I do better with sort of the periods where I kind of go off like by myself. And I mean, I lived like in a hovel in Switzerland by myself. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, but that, like, I just think an introvert generally like gets energy when they're sort of by themselves and kind of recharges their battery, way. And like, so something like Kona, when I'd have to be on all the time, it would definitely was a struggle. Just, I'd come back from the expo just like so drained and stressed out. Stress level 12. Yeah. But yeah, and Eric, I think I think like something like the pandemic's been really tough for him because, the extroverts who spend a lot of time, just with such a small group. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it's that's definitely what I found probably the toughest is I definitely think I've changed. I used to be super extrovert, like couldn't spend any time by myself, had to be around other people all the time, which is why I would always be at every party. I'd say yes to everything. And as I've gotten a bit older, I've recognized that I need to sort of go in between.
Find the balance, yeah.
Yeah. But definitely I had my 40th birthday a couple of weeks ago, and I wasn't going to make a speech or anything, but I was just so happy to be in a room full of people who I loved that I was like, I need to make a speech because I need to be up there, maybe being center of attention. But I had to tell everyone how happy I was, because that's exactly what I missed, was just being in a room full of people who I love. And
even I, being an introvert, like I definitely found myself where it's changed me a little bit in the sense that, because everyone's been so starved of that, I've definitely really appreciated being able to kind of see people again and have people over, and it just made me, it sort of makes you appreciate all as stuff gets more normal-ish. Appreciate that, and being able to kind of be with friends and family again.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, I want to go back to Kona, because anyone who's been in Kona knows how insane it is. Like, it's crazy, that race week, especially. And for pro athletes who, let's just say a top 10 pro athlete, that was always you. So there was always media commitments, sponsor commitments. There was always a lot that other people needed from you. The reason I'm bringing this up is, have you seen that Naomi Osaka, the tennis player, has said that she's not going to do any media commitments or press conferences while she's at the French Open? Have you seen her statement about that?
No, that's awesome. I love her, but yes.
Yeah.
I mean, she is badass. Like, I'm a super fan.
Yeah.
But
so
I think that's incredible. Well, I know who is the running back. I can't remember his name. But there was say what you were going to say about her, and I'll try to think of if I can think of him.
Okay, yeah. So she just so basically she said for her mental health, she will be skipping all media press conferences because it's not good for her mental health, and it's et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of discussion around that and the importance of media, and versus the importance of mental health, and then the role of a professional triathlete, and particularly the top-tiered tennis player who's getting paid a lot of money, and how that all factors in. And so there's a lot of discussion about it, and I go between two sides, because I can see absolutely the athlete's mental health side of things. I can totally appreciate that, and we never know. It's easy for people to stand on the sidelines and say, well, that's part of the job, whatever. But you just never know exactly what's going on with someone personally. But then from the media point of view, I completely understand that there's, media is there for a reason, and media helps athletes, become center stage and get all of these sponsorship deals. And, but yeah, so, and she signed a contract that this is part of her role when she's at this tennis event, and that's part of what she is getting paid for. And she's copping the fine. It's just like, I'll just cop it. I'm not turning up. I'll just cop the fine each time, which I think is something like 15 grand each time she doesn't turn up. I was just interested, because obviously being an introverted athlete, having to be at these different events during Kona week when all you want to do is focus on your race. And so I was just interested to get your thoughts on it.
And it is interesting, and I think everybody to a certain extent has to make that decision themselves, and for her maybe making the decision that lets her perform her best and keeps her hopefully mentally healthy. And I know the running back I was thinking of would go to the media and just would say, all his answers would be, I'm just here so I don't get fined. I can't think of his name though.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Wow. I'm sure again, everyone's yelling it right now, but it's one of those things where I do think, I mean, and this is where I always struggled as an athlete. It's like, and with sponsors is it's like, if you have, like, what are you there for? Like, is it the performance or is it the media? And I do think they go hand in hand to a certain extent, but I mean, I think to a certain extent, if you put too much weight and like too much energy into the media side, like the social media and that it can sometimes take away from the performance. And then, but a performance alone without the media is obviously not as powerful either. So it's sort of finding the right balance. And I do think, finding like someone like you was easy to talk to in Kona, because it was more of like sitting down and chatting with a friend versus, somebody I didn't really know, talking to them. And sort of those two, or just the expo in general, where there's just a lot of people, which is sort of overwhelming at times so like a one-on-one chat, I think, is a little easier in some ways than, kind of being out and, doing small talk with a lot of people and just thinking about like the very, all the things going around in your head.
Totally.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I find it a really interesting discussion. And I wonder what's going to happen with Naomi after this event. Because also, I mean, she's talking about after matches each time, because we see it all the time. The tennis players go into the press conference room, and I feel like some of the questions that she was getting or whoever, that's what concerns her is. Yeah. And we only see a small part of it, right? That there could be interviewers in there asking the same question, like, do you think you dropped the ball because of this? Or, you know, whatever, time and time again. But yeah, I feel, I don't know. I'm kind of sitting on the fence with it. Because, maybe that's part of media training, that it's up to her management team to sort of sit with her and help her through that. I don't know what the right answer is. And we also don't know, it's easy for her to have made this statement in the media that I'm not going to do it, and that's all we hear. But there could have been discussions with the French Open or whatever tennis authority for months and months and months, and it may have come to the final straw, and this is the way she's approaching it. We don't know. But
I mean, and the hard thing for media now too is with sort of social media channels is I do think it's taken away some of the power that the media has a little bit, because athletes can just go on their own channels and tell their story a little bit too, whereas it takes some of the, because I mean, back before the internet and social media, it's like you have to read the magazines or that's where you got all your information, whereas now it's a lot easier to kind of speak directly to your fans for them. So it's sort of, I think the media is just in a tough spot in some ways, because it's sort of where, making sure they can provide the value and also support the athletes. And
absolutely.
It's tough space to be in.
Yeah. Oh, wait, you just cut out then.
Yeah, I know. I said it's tough for you, Steph. It's a tough job. I wouldn't want to be. No, I just think, but I think that's where the value that you bring to the table is the fact that you do know. So, I mean, I feel like you have a personal relationship with so many of the athletes, similar to how, the top sponsors have it's in relationships is all the world is built on. And I think you've done a great job of having relationships with athletes, across the different distances, different content, kind of building that network, which I think is that's more valuable than anything else in the world, really.
Aw, look at you saying those things. Who even are you?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm way too happy. Yeah, I'm not angry enough.
But thank you. That's what kind of keeps me going, is I feel like that is our strength, are those relationships and the stories and the discussions that we can have that are different to, other people's social media or other media platforms, and individual athletes' platforms, it's all, if you think about it, it's all produced by themselves. It's self-promotion, it's self-produced, and that's not a slight on them. That's just what it is.
It's one side of the athlete, though. You don't see the other, all the dimensions.
Yeah. So like to try and feel like that's what we do. So hopefully that comes across.
Like the athlete's a rock and you pick it up and see what's growing on the underside, right?
Well, look what we've uncovered about you. Yeah. You're an asshole.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
But you're happy.
What is this? What is the title of this one? Will be like Meet the Asshole.
The retired asshole.
Yeah.
Before we start wrapping things up, because we have been going for over an hour, which is not a surprise. I mean, there's so many things I want to catch up with you about, because we've literally been saying, let's catch up for a chat, and then so let's just turn it into a podcast and people can listen to us catching up because we haven't spoken for ages. Now I forgot what I was going to say. No, before we start to wrap things up, because I know that you have two little munchkins that you need to probably say goodnight.
They're asleep.
Oh, they're done. Go get a drink.
Yeah.
Chatting.
Yeah.
What's and obviously we try not to talk too much about triathlon, but I always find it interesting speaking to people who have left the sport, but still you've got, one foot in the door in terms of coaching and listening to our podcast, so you know a little bit what's going on. So what would you say, and I know this is such a stock standard question, but I do think hindsight, or a retrospective look at your career is always good, because I know I've got like things that I remember about you from racing, and I used to love watching you. You're one of my favorite athletes to race, because you had that white line fever, and it was, but I loved it. But what is one of the highlights? Like, what's one of the things that you remember?
I think the race that sort of felt like I hit all cylinders was the ITU long distance. And I wonder if part of it is the ITU distance was probably where because I think Ironman was just a little too long. So the ITU distance is 6 hours. So it's actually a similar distance to the aptly race. And I could actually maintain for 6 hours. Whereas like in an Ironman, I think the last 2 hours were always like a bit of a shit show. No pun intended. So the ITU Worlds, when I raced there, that was probably a top race. And I always, I just felt like I didn't have a point there when it was, became a death march, which always seemed to happen. And I mean, there was an Ironman I did where it wasn't a period where you're just like, can I finish this thing? Like, And winning was also winning's always a highlight too. So I always wanted a world title. So I was like, I mean, maybe it's not Kona, but it's still a world title, and
it counts.
Yeah, I'll take it, I guess.
Remind me, what was it? What was your best performance in Kona, rank wise?
5th.
Yeah.
I feel like Kona was never a race that I mean, 2011, it was my 4th Ironman of the year. I think 2012 was 5th. 2013, I broke my collarbone the month before and tried to race, and 2014, I mean, 2014, I pulled muscle, but other than that, I just didn't perform. 2015, I was perfectly healthy, didn't perform. And then 2016, I got Lyme disease, and then
I forgot about that.
Secondary. I got sick probably a couple weeks before, which is a training mistake. So Brett and I obviously if you get sick, 2 weeks before the Ironman, you're training too hard, probably. So but so we got sick, but then instead of being smart, like I got a secondary bacterial infection, and so then I'm on like a Z-Pack 2 days before. Yeah, so that was my last race. I was not, I really shouldn't have started, but you're sort of like, I'd already decided it was my last race ever. And so it's sort of like, should I, like, I don't know. It's tough. So it's not really the last race I would have wanted, but yeah. But I had Konas where I had a chance, but the ones I did, I didn't perform. So,
but fifth is still like fifth fastest in the world. And I know you can't take the pro triathlete out of you, and you're like, but fifth in the world. Like,
nah. But I think I and this was one of the things that in hindsight, knowing myself, even if I'd won Kona, it would have been not good enough. And that's part of the reason I was a good athlete, is that, you know, I never was really, I'd win a race and be like, you know, what's next? And I think it's good, you know, one of those traits that helped me succeed, but then it also, if you're never able to kind of appreciate your successes, it makes it hard too. So sort of double-edged sword. But I just, in hindsight, knowing my personality, even if I'd won Kona, I wouldn't have been happy. And then retiring, I was at least happy retiring, because the only thing that I really wanted to do still that was win Kona. And I kind of came to the point where I was age-wise and point in my life-wise, I thought it was probably, I had my chances. And so I was 39 at that point. So nobody's won Kona, you know, out of there. I think 38 or maybe 39 is the oldest. So
I don't know that fact.
Statistically, yes. I mean, I don't know. I mean, somebody proved me wrong, but I don't think anybody's going to win in their 40s, but prove me wrong.
Come on, Riddy.
Because I would love it. I would love it. Because I do think it'd be really cool if, I mean, and I think Jan, might be 40 this year. I'm not sure though. There's quite a few good guys still racing in their, like, right around 40.
Yeah, because they have,
and obviously Rennie is 40, so it'd be awesome. But I think for me, I was kind of doing the math on my old broken down body. That I was a horse that needed to go to the glue factory. So, I mean, I definitely was. I mean, personally, I think I could start to see, you know, the fraying edges of the body. Right, this time.
So in summary of your career, then, how do you look back at your career now? Fondly?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't really. I mean, I might, in hindsight, I maybe change some of the things that we did training wise, but as far as, I wouldn't change anything. And I started late, so it definitely was maybe in hindsight, I would have started a little earlier, but it also gave me a cushion though, since I'd started later. I'd worked for a bunch of years, so I had, you know, the financial security that, for me, if I failed, I had plenty of savings, that it wasn't a huge, I didn't need to make a ton of money the first few years. Which was a nice relief versus somebody who doesn't go to, you know, comes right out of school and starts and has to try to make money right away.
Because how long were you an age grouper before you went pro?
I did 3 races. I did my first race, and then I looked up how to become a pro, because and then so you had to do 3 races. So I did 3 races. So my 4th race, I was a pro.
You're a machine.
And my 4th race, I was, but no, I'm just like, how silly I was. It's like, I sat down to, like, in transition, to put my bike shoes on, like, in the pro field, like, what an idiot. But
what was your first pro race?
Alcatraz.
Oh, okay.
Alcatraz in 2006.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And how did that pan out? Remind me.
I think I was like 11, which isn't bad considering, like, how clueless I was. And I just started with Siri, and I had Siri they were in Australia, and I was at home, like, I was still working full time at that point, but I just couldn't get motivated. So I didn't swim for December, January, February. And then they came back from their camp in Australia in March. And I was like, I mean, like I had all the good intentions to swim, but like I would kind of drive to the pool and be like, I don't really feel like it. So like it was trial by fire. And then at that point too, March. So they came back. I probably started with them for a couple of weeks, and then I didn't tell Siri. I went down, and I don't know if she probably still doesn't know this, but I went downhill skiing and had an injury. Like I hit a weird chunk of ice and my bones like hit together. I strained my LCL, MCL, like got a microfracture on my femur head. And I don't know what I told her, but I was like, then I couldn't run or do anything for like 6 weeks. But yeah, it was an auspicious start but it was probably good for the swimming though, because I think I could only swim. So at least it got me towards swimming fitness.
You are a nightmare.
Yeah, I straightened up. I mean, I did get there
eventually.
Yeah.
So when you're racing or your first race, what made you go, all right, I want to be a pro? Was it because you had a decent race where you're like, oh, I could be in this? Or were you just like, oh, screw it, this seems like fun, I'm going to have a crack?
Well, I've been kind of running semi-seriously, doing marathons. And I mean, I wasn't good enough to make much money. I made like maybe $1,000 or $2,000 a year at most. But, and I kind of, the running was, I actually had one injury where I tore the joint capsule in my hip, and they saw I had osteophytes. So they said it was early osteoarthritis. So they just were saying, you can't be running all these miles. And that was May of 2005. And then I did my first race in July, the first triathlon. I was like, okay, I'm going to try. Like I had I couldn't run for 8 weeks anyway. So I swam a little, I did some masters, and I had an old steel Bianchi road bike. And I did the race, and I did Boulder Peak, which is probably the only race that you can actually not be a good cyclist and do okay on if you're just willing to, like, it's got a steep 8% grade hill. So, a runner who has no idea really how to bike very well can do well in it, because it's, you just hump it up the hill, and then it's either up, most of it, like half of it's uphill and downhill. And then there's a little bit on the flats where I'm on a road bike, like my steel Bianchi, but I think I finished 40 seconds slower than the pro winner.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So, and I won the age group overall. So I was like, I could be okay at this. Like, and so then I entered, like, I think my next race was like, because I was like, what, I need to find an open race. So I did a race for the Cure, because like it had to be so many people. But that was like funny, because there's like, it's all people just racing to raise money and just to finish triathlon. And here I am, like my intense like self, like, get out of my way, cancer survivors. I'm here to win. And then I did one other silly race that fall, and then turned pro, and hired Siri that winter.
You are hilarious.
Yeah, a little intense. Oh,
it worked out okay.
It did. Nobody was hurt. That I know of.
You never look back, so you will never know. You never looked over your shoulder.
That's true.
So the blanket apology that you said at the start of this podcast goes out to all of those people as well, just in case, just to cover yourself. Yeah. Okay, so last question. When it comes to time where I don't know about you. So with Frankie, now when she goes to bed, we read her a couple of books, but then she always wants to talk about the day, which is kind of leading into us just making up stories as well. So she really enjoys that. So when it comes time for you to read to your two, but you're just making up stories, but it's going to one day be a story about mum and her triathlon career. How are you going to tell that story to them? What story are you going to tell them about mum being a professional triathlete? And please don't let it be about knocking down cancer survivors.
I don't know if they'll even believe, like, I'll be so old by the time they're I don't know. Oh, I think you've stumped me here, Steph.
Yes.
Usually I make up stories that are completely unrelated to triathlon. It's like some like it's like Princess Sydney and she has her friends named Penny. So it'll be stories about Sydney and Penny and their adventures and sort of based on something we've done for the day.
Yep.
I haven't featured in these stories yet, so I'll have to start adding myself as the heroine in.
Definitely.
I pull them under my bike.
All right.
No, I don't know. I mean, I do think that you learn so much in sport, so I hope they do sport but I don't know if they don't need to do triathlon, and almost I'd maybe, unless the sport kind of continues in the right, like it's in the right direction now with like the the pros really speaking up and having a voice, but sports are so hard. Like I want them to do sports and love sports, but I don't know if I'd want them to be pro athletes. It's a tough life.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting.
Especially to be angry the whole time. So
I want them to go into sports and not be happy.
Be happy.
Okay, Honey Badger. I feel like I'm just going to start calling you Honey because the badger, it seems like the badger's gone. The badger side of things is
we killed the badger. Well, if we're being honest, the badger's still, I mean, it's just that like it's not really, it's just like by itself running on the trails around here at very slow pace. That's where the badger does. Or it goes out for coffee rides, but
now I want to make you a t-shirt of a honey badger on a bike drinking coffee.
Yeah. But I like to look around too, like, oh, pretty houses.
Oh, goodness. All right, we're going to have to wrap things up because even though your kids are asleep, I actually have to get onto a live call thing very soon. I'm really sorry because I wanted to keep chatting even if we stopped recording. But
it's my bedtime anyway. It's 10 p.m. Like that's usually.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's way past your bedtime.
Well, now that I'm not a triathlete, it's not super strict. So it's still, though, I try to make Eric, I'm like, all right, let's go. 10 p.m.
Go crazy. Crazy. Oh, actually, before you go, no, we'll wrap this up and then I'll bring Frankie on so she can say hi.
Okay, that'd be great.
MB, this is the official sign off of the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. It was awesome catching up. And I'm interested to follow your coaching side of things to see how that's all going.
When you're doing the comeback. Yeah, when you're doing the comeback.
I'll give you a call.
Yeah. I'll give you a special rate. Mates rates.
Brilliant. I like it. Thanks, friend. I will catch up with you in like 30 seconds once I've hung up from the podcast.
Bye.
Bye.